We have an action-packed agenda starting a few minutes late, so I'm going to keep my introduction of each speaker fairly brief, and I'm even not going to introduce myself particularly, but I really want us to get straight into content. So our first speaker, and each speaker has got an allocation of about 15 minutes. And at the end, I'll briefly tell you that I would like us to use the chat function. There doesn't appear to be a Q&A for these breakout sessions, so there's a chat window, and I would like you to feel free to put questions into the chat. And Christian and other speakers, just be aware that if we don't quite have enough time to deal in real time with all the chat questions that come up, I will ask you to consider, especially if you're online, to continue some chat Q&A interactions in the chat window, even while the next person has started speaking, so that people who've got questions can get nice answers from you. So with that, without further ado, I'd like to welcome and ask to start speaking in a moment Christian Prinz, who is the medical project manager at the Gotthard Health Group in Heidelberg. You're going to tell us about early diagnosis, clinical decision support in Wilson's disease. Christian, the floor is yours. And I hope that we can do some magic to enable you to present. Great. Thank you, Christian. We see your slides nice and clearly.
Which is great. So thanks, Professor, for introducing me and having me here today. I guess that most of you never have heard about Wilson's disease, have you? And the reason for this is it's a rare disease which you don't see so often. The problem with rare diseases is that the early diagnosis is, it's challenging but essential, so that you can help your patients later on, but it's pretty much the difficult thing to diagnose it early because, as it is the case for Wilson's disease, which is a copper storage disease with a frequency of 1 to 30,000, so really rare, that the symptoms, in particular at the onset, are pretty much inspecific. So you show some symptoms, but it is not really clear in the beginning what the actual disease is really like. So you have some ZNS involvement, you have some eye involvement, you have liver involvement, cardiovascular things. And the problem is that the cause for the disease is pretty easy to understand. It's an impairment of the biliary copper excretion, but the symptoms are not so clear. So what happens over time is, in general, for rare diseases and for Wilson's disease in special, that the copper deposition starts in the early phase, and over time, the disease gets more severe. So there's an impairment of cellular and tissue function, and over time, this accumulates and might result in severe tissue damage and organ failure. And as you can see, in this red phase, this is the phase when you should recognize it so that a targeted therapy can slow down or prevent the disease progression. And this is exactly where the interesting phase for a physician and a patient starts. So the diagnosis of rare diseases is challenging, as I said, and you can see it from those two numbers. So 25% of patients who are affected by a rare disease wait up to 30 years for a diagnosis. And those who receive a diagnosis, in many cases, the first diagnosis is wrong. So it's a pretty exhausting journey for a patient, but also for the treating physician until you get your real diagnosis. And you can really say that it's an odyssey until you get your diagnosis and your treatment to stop the disease. So the ideal setting would be that you are in a specialized center where you have the experts who are working with you. This is true for only very few patients. The critical thing is that before treating, you need a step where the differential diagnostics happen. So you need to confirm a disease in a specialized center. And this is true for a bit more, but still for few patients. What is, let's say, the everyday scenario that there are many patients who are in practices at their general practitioners and also at specialists. In private practices, they go to their family doctor with some unspecific symptoms, and they might suffer from a rare disease, but they don't know. And it is pretty hard to come from step 1 to step 2, and in the end, receive your ideal care. And to enable this, we are using algorithms which can support the detection of rare diseases. So what I'm going to talk about today and show you here is our software add-on, the GHG Praxisdienst, which is a software bundle which can help physicians to better manage their patients and to channel therapy options. This is possible because we have an interface to the electronic health records of CGM software users, which is quite a big proportion among all physicians in Germany. And the great thing is that we can analyze the structured data in the electronic health record, which is part of the physician's daily workflow. So a physician is all the time working with the electronic health records, and we are integrated into this workflow and can help the physician in treating patients and in informing patients about what could be the case, for example. In theory, we could reach 60,000 patients in private practice when working together, not only with CGM, but also with Informatics. So we could cover, let's say, quite many patient cases and electronic health records. What does an algorithm now do, and how can we support the detection of Wilson's disease now? So let's get to the real thing now. We are having an expert system which is based on rule combinations. So we have a certain set of criteria. So this might be a symptom which is hepatomegalia, for example. We might have other symptoms which in combination give a hint that a certain rare disease is present. And we are having many, many rule combinations, which when found in the patient file can give a hint that there's a rare disease. And to show it in real now, you can see here the patient file of a test patient, which we created here. And you can see this might be the entire history of a patient. And this is not so much. I mean, if you see a patient for 10 or 20 years as a family doctor, then this patient file is so full with information so that as a physician, you would not grasp everything and see everything all the time and be aware of a rare disease. But what the algorithm does is, as soon as the physician enters a diagnosis, so here you can see this line appeared, the algorithm recognizes disease-specific patterns in this electronic health record by scanning ICD codes, which is the way how physicians code diseases, which is also important for reimbursement, the medication, demography, like age or sex, and also free text. And you can see here, those 4 things were detected by the algorithm. And the physician now gets a notification that the rare disease morbus Wilson's disease, might be found in this electronic health record, and that the physician could now inform him or herself about the disease. It's a short dossier of a couple of pages, and a recommendation what to do now, namely refer this patient to a specialized center to do differential diagnostics. So this is the first step, how a patient could find his or her way easier and quicker into the right specialized center. This is not everything. So this is one end of the patient journey, namely the diagnosis. The other thing which I would like to discuss is what happens if a patient got his or her diagnosis, what can we do with this patient? And this is an appropriate treatment. And as you can imagine, early treatment initiation and adherence to this therapy is key so that you can deal with a rare disease and stop it from getting more severe. And this is something which we can support with our medication patient app Mediteo, which you can see here, where we can help the patient to manage the disease. So what does Mediteo do? You can add drugs and make individual intake plans. You can get information about your drugs and also your diseases and get reminders when the next intake is scheduled. And you can manage and document all your medication and health-related things. So in the end, this is a really useful tool and powerful tool to deal with your disease as soon as you got a treatment and your diagnosis. So just to give you some numbers on how we can reach out to physicians and how we can reach out to patients. So in 2021, where we have complete data sets, we got more than 100 notifications in a panel of 700 physicians who see such patients. Yeah, pediatricians, general practitioners, internal medicine specialists who are, let's say, the address where you would see Wilson's disease patients. And the range in our own network is with more than 2,000 physicians that we can scan, or the algorithm scans 70,000 electronic health records per day. So this is just to give you a number on how many rare disease patients we could help to identify, given that a rare disease is present with a frequency of 1 to like 30,000, as it is the case here, but it can be even more rare and harder to find. In an extended range, it will be even more, with 2 million electronic health record scans per day. And if we just take the frequency of our notifications, then we are in a range of 1 to 14,000, which is still more than the real frequency of the disease. But from the small pieces of data fed into the algorithm and being present here, this gives you an idea, well, if the real frequency is 1 to 30,000, then you can at least help to exclude a rare disease. And in some cases, you will find the initial assumption to be true. And this is something which we can somehow measure, namely, how do our physicians react to our notifications? Do they interact with our software? Do they find this useful? And indeed, in 50% of the cases, there's an interaction. So this might be they click on inform, they click on reject, or they click on accept and read it. Some physicians also close it, but at least it came to their mind, yes, this could be Wilson's disease. Let's think about it. Let's give it a thought. And in 6% of the cases, the physicians accepted it and said, yes, this is something where I read a bit more and consider what to do with this patient. And I think from those numbers, this is already gives you a hint that algorithm-based approaches like this are useful to use. In terms of medication, I would like to show you some numbers, namely the typical Wilson's disease therapy. And these are those 3, penicillamine, trientine, and zinc acetate, which among our Mediteo users are rare. So we have, I think, 1 million installs of Mediteo over the years. And you can see, if you compare this number to the number of Wilson's disease intakes, yes, this is really a rare disease. We have some handful of intakes and users. While the companion time, so the time a patient uses the app to manage the therapy, is pretty long. So you can see that, and you don't really know when did a patient start. So here we have patients who used Mediteo for 205 days to manage penicillamine. And also the other two drugs are long-term treatment. So it's not that you take it for 14 days, like antibiotics for a week and then you're done, but it's a chronic disease and also a chronic treatment, let's say. The adherence, so gives you an idea on does the patient really take his or her medication as planned. So if I say 1 pill per day and I do this over 10 days and on one day I forgot it, then I have those 90%. And this is true at least for one treatment, while the others are much lower. So every second intake is missed for some reason. This can be related to side effects, which the patient would like to avoid. It can be the case that a patient says, well, today I don't need it because the symptoms are not so severe. So you can see that there are specific behaviors, and as a doctor and also as a company, you can learn from these insights to make the therapy more convenient and make the patient journey better. So in all, and this is already my summary of my talk, there's great potential for using eHealth and digital health approaches to enable evidence-based diagnosis and therapy support. And I think even in particular for the future, this is even more appealing because we are systematically collecting and processing data. And in Germany, when this elektronische Patientenakte will become true in the next months and years, and more data is collected and stored, then those algorithms become even more powerful and can help to predict diseases and to recommend the physician, but also patient, what to do and maybe even predict the course of the disease. Yeah, so with this, I thank you a lot, and I will be happy to receive your questions, either now in person or in the chat. Thank you a lot.
Christian, thank you very much indeed. That is fantastic. And I think what I would also like to just highlight out of your method really is that for rare diseases and where early diagnosis is so important, you can't give people apps and say, if you experience these symptoms, please start entering. Because by the time they realize they need your app, it's already too late. So this concept of EHR screening that really you introduce through this method is the only way. And it's absolutely brilliant to hear you doing it in practice and that actually you're already getting really great results. So well done. Congratulations on demonstrating how this method really is the only way forward. Now, I'm a bit mindful of time, so I'm going to ask if you could just give a quick answer to a question that's come in the chat regarding the sensitivity. You indicated about interactions, and you said 1 in 14,000. Are there a large number of false positives at this stage, and how do you see that improving over time?
Okay, so I see several parts in answering this question, but in general, we do not really get so much feedback on did this come out with a real diagnosis, because this is a matter of data protection and we don't want to get back the patient data in this form. Also, the screening of the file does not happen on our servers, but locally at the physician. So we provide the rules and the software. And the only thing we get back is the interaction number. So I cannot really point out a number of sensitivity, but sometimes we get back anecdotal feedback from physicians who tell us, well, I had 2 patients where your software indicated a rare disease, and half a year later I got a diagnosis. We are now systematically building up, let's say, methods to get to know these things maybe a bit more systematically, but at this point, giving the physician an idea and getting the feedback what he did with this information is all we got so far.
That's very fair. And I think at some point you probably will need someone to sponsor a kind of clinical trial and allow you to really build up that evidence where you have the data because of consent. So let's hope that opportunity arises in the future, which I think would be a strengthening to your case. Okay, well, thank you very much, Christian. I'm going to now move on to our next speaker, who is Ozar Minster, who is the professor and head of department at the Shapik, if I'm pronouncing it right, National Healthcare University of Ukraine. You are there in person, I believe. And I would like to just, on behalf probably of the whole audience, offer our real thanks, special thanks for you coming from this very special country. So please go ahead and speak to us with our thanks.
Today we discuss many very interesting problems. First of all, digital health for all, or transfer knowledge, transfer data to knowledge. But first of all, question, what does mean data? Data is evidently data is data, or are data. But what about validity data, about pertinency of data? What about another characteristic, quality and quantitative characteristic of data? And it's a problem. No talk, no discuss about our future. Future, of course, is much better than today. But it's impossible to build this future without data. So a report about data. I manage from this place. Just a second. Okay, much better. Thank you. Some the base assertion. Recent years, the emergence of numerous technologies. We can also note the development of robotics, augmented reality, a system using artificial intelligence, but still the effect of use of new technology cannot lead to decisive changes in the structure of medical care. You remember my question before key lecture about quality of medical care. It's a key question. Moreover, the studies have appeared that specifies the low effectiveness of evidence-based medicine. Before, it's impossible to realize questions. For example, are systematic review and meta-analysis still useful research? Our dear colleagues, question, are systematic review and meta-analysis still useful research? We are not sure. Me too. I'm not sure that it's a useful technology, meta-analysis and evidence-based medicine at all. Why? We, like other authors, believe that due to our insufficient work on medical data, among the numerous types of such insufficient work on data, one should name data discrimination in a pure, error by omission, asymmetry of information. It's new terms and very few investigation devoted such problem. Of course, there are other type, for example, collection of invalid data, irrelevant data. Let's dwell on the most common use for bad data. And first definition is data discrimination or data censorship, also called discrimination by algorithm. It's a bias that occurs when identified data types or data sources are intentionally or unintentionally treated different than others. Practically, in such situation, we meet every day doctor, provide investigation patient, and problem data discrimination every minute of this investigation. As medical practice continue to use more sophisticated electronic health record, we know, of course, this technology, need for effective health data management is increasing. Health data management is the process used to record, store, protect, and analyze the data you receive from various sources. Effective healthcare data management allow healthcare professionals to develop and have a comprehensive view patient patient conditions. Currently, the medical service has many new technologies that allow the use of scientifically based diagnostic methods to improve provision of medical care to the patient. And of course, we know such technology like artificial intelligence, like other technology, but the following six technology should pay attention to threats of data discrimination are especially great. It seems for everybody of us that molecular diagnostic, image analysis, robotics, information management, and artificial intelligence, it's a good technology without data discrimination. Really, absolutely another picture. It's a big factor of risk to get information and to provide processing of this information. So six technology should pay attention. It's a molecular diagnostic, image, first of all, analysis, robotics, information management, artificial intelligence. Small overlapping. Another thing is the main areas of data professional use. It should be emphasized that the integration of data, especially big data, working with data of various types, from batch to streaming, and their transformation to further use, don't have, please, my dear colleague, please pay attention, don't have a clear interpretation and recommendation. The concept of data relevancy, validity, reliability, pertinency are not applied. And as a result, we have numerous diagnostic errors, missed opportunity for diagnosis, and data discrimination. The purpose of our investigation was to substantiate the strategy of a safe and effective medical data management system and the logic of creating a completely open data system. First of all, it's problem with big data. The use of big data would make discrimination more widespread. That's what poses danger. Big data analytics is defined as a set of advanced digital technologies such as data mining, neural networks, deep learning, profiling, pay attention for deep learning, and data mining. Threat of data discrimination is especially big. Reason for data discrimination is information processing consists of the data scientist needs to translate into format computer code. But the choice of target variable and class labels is a subjective process. In addition, it's a position to shift the data of the model. Very often, it's very important slide. Why? Because the training data in contaminated with discriminatory bias cases, the system will consider them as valid examples and they produce the discrimination in his own result. In this context, the phenomenon of overfitting has been mentioned, where a model can become too specialized or specific to the data used for training. And instead of finding the best possible decision, they simply leave a most appropriated rule. It's a problem. And secondary, we talk about data discrimination, big data. From this point of view, concept of the norm and conformity to this norm with the mandatory distinction between actually existing and the proper and more conceptual problem, such as changing the concept for personal identifying through profiling or analysis, can be considered key data datafication, information society, and so on. So challenging of big data, since big data technology deal with very diverse data. In result, we have, first of all, error by omission, typical mistake in doctor practice. Error of omission is another form of informational processing function in specification that occurs when terms had caused discrimination and ignored or not accounted for the model. Next sentence about error by omission, especially observed when conducting surveys, and the whole concept of testing reinforces this average result problem. We normally we base it on the average, not original, not personal, but first of all, we're using technology to receiving average data. Even when testing against carefully segmented mailing lists, the ultimate definition of success is determined by data decision based on average. Working with average generalization, ideal client that at best can only reflect some of the user preferences. Very interesting problem, data discrimination and diagnostic procedures. The rapid development of diagnostic technology creates a new problem, the emergence of new errors in decision-making due to inaccurate in patient examination processes. Diagnostic errors are unacceptably common and harmful. However, they receive little attention in the area of patient safety. We continue data discrimination in diagnostic procedures and say that the reason for the include the lack of widespread awareness to this problem is the many complex factors that lead to diagnostic errors. And I would like to show some slides, for me, it was shock. First of all, definition, diagnostic errors include in the accuracy, timeless, and communication with patient can cause increased morbidity in children because we as sample tell about pediatric primary care. My dear colleagues, national studies have found rates or diagnostical errors or missed opportunity diagnosis in pediatric primary care. 44 patients with elevated blood pressure, 11% for patients with abnormal laboratory values, and 62% for adolescents which able to access the presence of depression. Dear colleague, it's fantastic data. If we make 54% in pediatric practice, if you make 11% for quantitative laboratory values, it's a terrible. It's a data of American Academy of Pediatrics. Diagnostic errors are common in pediatric practice, and some area reach 62%, only due to our data. 62% now. Reasons. The most common reason for missed adolescent, for example, depression in pediatric practice is refusal of screening. For missed hypertension, it was the inability to recognize and act not abnormal blood pressure. Everything is our work with data. The last problem what I would like to pay attention is the asymmetry of information. In a situation of asymmetric distribution of information, one of the patient knows more than other about the diagnostic process and treatment. Not the first time the presence of information asymmetry was not 1963. Up to now, we haven't any recept to do algorithm to protect informational asymmetry. The parties during the information asymmetry do not have necessary information, but at the same time, they are equal or not equal terms. What we must do such situation? Problem data management in digitalization, digital health for you in medicine. First of all, it's a new perspective on transdisciplinary approach in system biomedicine. Three key words. First, transdisciplinary. Secondary, it's a system approach. And third, it's a biomedicine. Not medicine as we have practice, but biomedicine. Changes in data processing now based on new elements of information theory, which in turn create subsets of medical language based on telecommunication, biomedical data processing, biomedical signaling, and offer measure to effectiveness of tracking people health. Return back to the based evidence medicine. Assessment of the landscape of current systematic review and meta-analysis show that many focus of important questions, many redundant and unnecessary, many ultimately only 3% critically useful. My dear colleagues, 3% of investigation, what do or did in the principle of evidence-based medicine, only 3% useful. If you can consider the literature on evidence-based medicine in the mass, it's mostly a waste. It's not my conclusion. It's conclusion American, European investigators. You can read these reports. At the same time, the minority of systematic reviews and meta-analysis, they can be extremely useful, 3%. The main challenge is how to increase the minority and, if possible, even make it majority among future systematic review and meta-analysis. But it's our dream. Right now we have only 3% of useful investigation in based evidence medicine. New technology.
Professor Mincer, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we are running a little bit out of time. Could I ask you to just give a few closing remarks?
I need 3 minutes to finish and then answer questions. 2 minutes, not more.
Okay,
New technology, its appearance, the GoFair system. It's a very interesting system. Of course, it's what does mean GoFair? Findable, accessible, reusable, and so on. Methodological recommendation and instruction are submitting data in accordance with FAIR, being published in European countries. Conclusions. There is a need for a comprehensive real-time medical data management system that will allow physicians, patients, and external users to enter their medical and lifestyle data into the global system. It's an important conclusion. If you remember before report in the plenary session, inclusion of big data analytics will help to better predict or recognize the diagnosis and the predict diseases accordingly help in the development and effective plan for prevention, complication, and treatment of the diseases. Third conclusion, scaling communication with each patient to real time is possible only with absolutely sure with help of artificial intelligence. Manual interventions simply cannot serve 1,000 users at the same time, each of in their own way, addressing it individually directly. This conclusion should be especially emphasized when creating a protect model of family medicine organization in future. And not last, for conclusion, transfer information is in the heart of development biology. And thus it's imperative that we can form a logical and structured approach to the healthcare language. And the last, it's a semiotic. Today nobody made and will make a report about biosemiotic. It's very important with the language rules for signals and code in the biological system. It combines many ideas from diverse areas, including system theory, information theory, linguistic, and may offer new perspective in the classification, meaning biological and medical signaling theory of biosemiotic must be created. So the main conclusion, what I would like to propose you, to decide quo vadis altogether on future. If we understand this motto. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Minster. Thank you very much for your presentation. I think it's very relevant and important, especially when we are considering making use of data for AI. Luckily, there is a big panel discussion this afternoon, and I think some of the points you've raised could also be discussed during that panel session. We don't have time now to take questions, I'm sorry to say, but what I would like to do is to thank you for your presentation, ask the audience to give a round of applause on site, and then to ask Farah to come up and be ready to give her presentation, please.
Thank you.
And Farah, you are a member of the home team
Yes.
from this institute, so delighted to welcome you as a research associate, and to some extent you're going to be following on by talking about bias.
Yes, I will.
So thank you.
All right, I'm Farah Fernandez from European Campus Rottal-Inn, and I will be talking to you about artificial intelligence and specifically bias. Now, when we know that bias is a very sensitive issue, and especially if artificial intelligence systems begin to demonstrate bias, we know that it's a vulnerability that needs to be addressed. So what is bias? What are the sources of this bias, and how can they be mitigated? These are all questions that need to be addressed. Now, we hear a lot about how artificial intelligence is part of our lives. If we do a web search or if we do some online shopping, there's going to be an AI shopping assistant who is going to give us recommendations. In case we need to translate a word or a sentence, an artificial neural network is going to do that for us. Basic forms of AI are being used in the Internet of Things. And probably the best example of all is our smartphone, which acts as a personal digital assistant. Therefore, we are continually being subject to the decisions of artificial intelligence. Now, in healthcare, the machine learning models are able to analyze health data and personal health trends. And it works in a way so that we can have better and quicker decisions. Now, there's a lot of clinical applications of artificial intelligence as well as for administrative applications. Now, algorithms are basically instructions to a machine how to perform or how to execute a mathematical operation. Now, very simply put, this is a machine learning model. So it works by training the model from data from the population. And in case we have data from an individual, this trained model is now going to classify the data and give a decision. A little bit like human decision, but of course there are differences. Now, what happens if when AI systems falter? For example, there was this case in the United States where they used a decision support tool to measure the tendency of a defendant for reoffending. This tool was called a Compass, and researchers noted that Compass was over-predicting or putting a certain group of patients at a higher risk or twice the risk of reoffending when actually this wasn't true. And another example was when a male executive found that he had a higher credit limit on his Apple credit card as compared to his wife when they shared the same income and the same credit score. Yet another example was when facial recognition software in digital cameras began over-predicting certain facial features. In the healthcare sector, there was the case of this AI system that predicted the need for follow-up based on health costs. Now, a certain group of underprivileged people may not have the same health costs as others, though they may be as sick as the other people. Now, this particular AI system erroneously tried to say that if since their health costs were not that high, that they were not that sick. So they had to recalibrate the model, and instead of using health costs, now they began using physiological variables. So what is bias? So bias is a systematic error or an unexpected tendency to favor one outcome over another. From a statistical point of view, it is an error or a distortion with the use of statistical analysis, could be unfair sampling or testing error. From a cognitive point of view, it is an innate tendency to favor in favor of or against a certain individual group or belief based on some preconceived notions. What are the consequences? Now we have unfair judgment. We have decisions that are not based on objective criteria and decisions not free from external influences. So this scoping review sought to answer three important questions. The first is, what are the common pitfalls of AI-based medical solutions in healthcare? What are the sources of bias in AI algorithms, and how do these biases affect the outcome of AI decision-making? And third, can these biases be located and mitigated? Now, Doyen and Dario listed out a number of pitfalls of AI-based medical solutions, some of them being generalization to new populations, discriminatory bias, problems with the sample size, difficulty in reproducibility, the need for explainability, and others such as accidental fitting of confounders and model drift. Now, all these biases can be classified into three main sources, that is data-driven bias, algorithmic bias, and human bias. Now, how does data bias affect AI? So data, as we know, is used to train and to test an algorithm. In the event that we have if we have a homogeneous data set or a non-representative data set, it just reveals the existing bias in these data sets that show up for groups that are disadvantaged or excluded or poorly represented. We also have measurement bias, which occurs when choosing or collecting features or labels to use in predictive models, like how we saw in the AI system that used health costs as proxies. Now, AI poorly generalizes to cohorts outside those whose data was used to train and validate the algorithms. A study conducted by Chelly and colleagues revealed that most of the databases that were used to train AI algorithms were found in the United States and China. So you can see that there is a lack of diversity with the databases. Now, how does algorithmic bias affect AI? It is introduced across the various stages of the AI lifecycle development. Now, we need to know that a model is optimized using training data, and its quality is often measured against certain benchmarks. Now, bias can arise when these benchmarks do not represent the general population. Aggregation bias occurs when some AI applications use a single model, which is unlikely to suit all groups where the population of interest is heterogeneous. Now, there are a number of types of other types of algorithmic bias, and all these result in errors in classifying subgroups of patients, estimating risk levels, and making predictions. Is there a human factor in AI bias? Yes, there is, because humans can introduce their own biases. The healthcare personnel that collect data can introduce bias into that data. We can have automation bias, whereby clinicians accept the guidance of an automated system and cease searching for confirmatory evidence. Model developers can also introduce bias because they design the algorithms according to what they feel are the most urgent problems to solve, which may not reflect the needs of a patient. Consequences of bias. So they will propagate deeply rooted societal biases. They will misdiagnose certain patient groups, which leads to the fact that now clinical AI is not meaningful. It is not guaranteed for broader populations, which perpetuates further global health inequity. We just saw that populations in data-rich regions are going to benefit much more than the data-poor regions. And it is a big problem if we have biased AI systems who are autonomously going to triage patients. Now, how can we mitigate this bias? Now, Walkinger and colleagues developed these strategies for mitigating bias across the different stages of machine learning systems development. So at the first stage, which is data collection and data preparation, we need to see that there's a better representation of all the patient groups. We need to identify when the particular machine learning model deteriorates for a certain subgroup of patients. And we need to have the end users understand when it is suitable to use a certain machine learning model for a specific group of patients. At the stage of model development, we need to adopt techniques for debiasing. So this is adversarial debiasing or oversampling or continual learning. Basically, we need to tune the model so that it performs optimally in all demographic groups. At the stage of model evaluation, we need to know how our models can be explainable, how they can be interpretable. We need to validate how the model generalizes to data from different patients. If there are errors, we need to find out how they occurred and where the errors are, and pinpoint to predictors which might be biased and, of course, remove them. And finally, at the stage of deployment, we need to check if the characteristics of the patients are representative of the patients that were used in the training data, and to evaluate the overall prediction performance for errors that were not known during development of the model. Now, Fletcher and colleagues developed this workflow diagram to show steps to examine a model for bias, fairness, and appropriate use. So they have 3 important questions that need to be asked. First is, has the model been adapted to the patient population? If no, then you need to adjust the model parameters. Second question, does the model exhibit any bias? Yes, then you need to examine the feature extraction and try the various bias mitigation methods. Third, is the model performance dependent on any protected attribute? If yes, then you need to select a fairness criteria and recalibrate your model. Which comes to the point of explainable AI. All right. So interpretability is related to how much a model decision can be understood. Explainability gives insights into reasons for why the particular model has come to that decision. Now, machine learning models are generally of 2 types. We have a white box model, which delivers easy to understand outcomes, a good trade-off between accuracy and explainability, and a black box model, which is extremely difficult to explain and comprehend. Also, it is harder to detect any error or bias in the black box. Okay. So explainable AI now is technology that aims to make AI systems more understandable to humans. So it needs to be interactive with customized explanations for different users. It needs to identify shortcomings in a system and allow clinicians to be confident in the decisions they make with the assistance of the clinical decision support systems. Therefore, we need to study more about how we can convert these black box models into glass boxes where we can clearly see why the algorithm comes to a particular decision. In conclusion, artificial intelligence systems have the potential to automate many of our daily tasks. However, there are inherent biases which leads to questions of fairness in AI systems. If an algorithm scores 2 people the same, then those 2 people should have the same basic needs. Algorithms that fail this particular test are considered to be biased, and we need to be it's important to be vigilant and use systems to mitigate these biases. And we need to have further research to study where the explainable AI systems that could reveal these hidden biases. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Bara, thank you for a very clear presentation. There was a nice transition between the 2 speakers, Professor Minster and then yourself. We are running a bit late, but shall we just allow a moment for a question? Maybe we should give priority to anybody. Are there many people in the room with you? I can't see the audience.
There are many people in the room.
Sure. Yeah. Well, do you want to take just one question, maybe if there's one from the room, and we'll just ask the online people to still feel free to use the chat. Yes. And maybe Farah, at a later stage, you could chip in some responses to those.
Thank you, Farah. Great report here. So you've spent a little bit of time, looking at this kind of systematic errors of the bias. So my question then would be, when we talk about, human bias, so how would you see there? So how would you tackle those human biases? Because they are quite advanced, right? So going just from kind of personal bias up to, societal biases, right? So when we've got, for example, one country with very restrictive legislation and access to the data sets towards, countries which are very, flexible in terms of, access to data and, getting to do research, on non-consented data, for example. So that's the whole big topic of, that kind of human bias, what you're saying. So the question is, we know from the technical standpoint, systematic standpoint, we know what to do, right? And you've got the model, you've got the re-evaluation cycle and everything like that. So what can we do about this human bias? How can we tackle that one? Thank you.
Well, going as per the model, I would feel that human biases would be tackled right at the outset. So right at the time of data collection and data preparation, we need to have various methods to see whether the data was collected properly. That would be, I guess, the most reasonable way we can tackle human bias, right at the first stage.
That's a very good answer, but I think it was a very important question. And I'd like us to keep that question of human bias and political bias and legal bias in mind for the rest of the day, especially the panel in the afternoon. Thank you, Farah, for giving us a nice talk and answering that question. So can I just check now that the next presentation is a recording? Is that right?
It's a recording.
Okay, so shall we go ahead and
yeah,
have that? Thank you.
Dear colleague and organizer of the conference, we present you a report on the topic information analytic representation of the magneto-electrochemical circuit of metabolism, life, and health. Understanding the reasons of the phenomena of the biological life is one of the main into the question of fundamental science. What exactly are the mechanisms and processes that make the molecular of our body alive? How exactly and the essence of what is this happening? Answer to this question can allow modern medical science to make significant progress. They can discover now mechanism of action on the tissue of the human body in order to prolong human life. Science of the 21st century has advanced significantly. It is now clear that everything that happens in tissue cells is related to their metabolic process. It has been provided that all metabolic processes are the result of magneto-electric interaction between atoms and molecules. That is, molecular chemistry is a secondary consequence of electromagnetism. Today, the fact of the presence of the electromagnetic components in the human body is undisputed truth, and the determination of the electromagnetic parameters of the human body is already widely used of diagnostic purposes in medicine. Mankind has practically investigated the nano level of structure of matter at the current stage of scientific development, and it has come on the understanding of the field organization of the structure of matter. The scientific opportunity for the further development of medicine has been formed now thanks to the possibility of transdisciplinary implementation of the latest fundamental scientific knowledge. However, there are no generating theoretic works in this direction in medicine. That is why the aim of the theoretic study was to conceptualize a system of use on the role of internal electromagnetic fields in the human body for understanding the essence of course of metabolism, the phenomena of biological life and health. The study was conducted in integration of 3 universities. We have formulated 12 basic concepts of the atomic level of the structure of matter. They are present on this slide 1 and 2. We have formulated 4 main conclusions about the atomic level of the structure of matter. First, all living biological systems, including the human body, at the atomic level and electromagnetic nature of their structure and consist of field structure fermions, which are united by the field force of electromagnetic strong and weak nuclear interaction, the pairs of which are boson. Second, all living biological systems, including the human body, have inherent properties of wave-particle duality, which determines the presence of wave characteristic in their structure. Third, all chemical reactions that take place in living biology systems, including the human body, have an electromagnetic nature and are the result of the manifestation of electromagnetic interaction of substance in them and are the result of the manifestation of electromagnetism. Fourth, all living biology systems can be considered at the micro level of their structures as a form of fundamentally organized energy, which has the total energy characteristic of the particle of microcosm that forms them, because the particle, quark, antiquark, etc., that make up an atom are inherent energy. We have formulated 6 basic concepts of the molecular level of the structure of matter. They are present on the next 9 slides. 1, 2, next, and so. And we have formulated 4 main conclusions about the molecular level of the structure of matter. All living biological systems, including human body, have an electromagnetic nature of structure, consist of resonant electromagnetic wave or field structure oscillator and are united by electromagnetic field interaction. All living biological systems, including the human body, exhibit the properties of wave-particle duality and can be modeled at the molecular level in the form of resulting different electromagnetic wave pockets in the node of which there are atoms as that are source of wave generation, which cause of present of wave characteristic or structure at the macro level of organization. All chemical reactions that occur in living biological systems, including the human body, have an electromagnetic nature and the result of the manifestation of field and electromagnetic interaction of substance in them. Since the atom that form molecule are essential energy, all living biological systems, including the human body, can be considered at the micro level of their structure as a form of fundamentally organized energy, which is characterized by the total energy characteristic of the components of the microcosm that form it. The phenomena of the life at the molecular level is due to the constant course of electromagnetic process that the structure and function integrity of a living biological system and which cases with the ends of its death. Water is mandatory component in studying the life of a biology system, as it creates conditions for a non-chemical information energy cooperation of biology molecular of the body. Thus, the primacy of magnetoelectric interaction at the molecular levels is the root cause of existence and adequate function of living biology system of various levels of complexity, including the human body, thus the vital activity and functioning of living biology system in the corridor of the physiology norm called health is completely determined by the magnetoelectric support of the molecules of its organism according to which the recipient of the energetical change water envelopment. It is important to note that based on this position, life and health acquire new characteristics of their conceptual apparatus, science, they should be described as a state of having adequate levels of magnetic-electric energy process between biomolecules, which objectively manifested at the macro level by the normal level of metabolism, function, and of tissue and organs of the human body according to the magneto-electrochemical theory. Accordingly, it is logical to consider the disease as a disorder of the magneto-electric state of biomolecule structure, and death is their complete absence, and the human body is one of the form of the magneto-electrochemical organization or biological matter of the earth. This radically depends on understanding of the structure, organization, and function of the human body, fundamentally change the nature of the interpretation of biological process that occurs in the human body in normal and pathological condition, expand the possibilities of its deep study and description of the pathogenesis of disease of the human body, and demonstration the need for paradigmatic transition from the electrochemical concept of exchange substance to the magneto-electrochemical. Conclusions first. The life of a biological system is a process of magneto-electric activation of its biomolecules. Conclusion second. It is expanded to fully integrate this knowledge into medical science by changing the electrochemical paradigm of metabolism to a magneto-electrochemical one. Conclusion third. This knowledge is next step toward deepening fundamentally knowledge about the pathogenesis of disease of internal organs. They can contribute to the further optimization of their treatment and prevention. So a scientific breakthrough in the understanding of the fundamental issue of the organization of matter and the nano level of its structure open new perspective in the further study of functioning of the human body at the micro level of its structure. It forms the nervous paradigm of ideas about the mechanism of realization of the phenomena of life and human health. It can warm up fundamentally different ways of therapeutic effect and thus new mechanism of already known treatment as well, for example, quantum pharmacology, etc. Our co-speaker, Professor Ozar Mincer, can answer a question about this report. We wish you all to be healthy. Thank you for attention.
Well, thank you. It's a pity, obviously, we cannot thank Ghana in person, but that was a fascinating opening into an area that I confess that I know very little about. And so my imagination has now been provoked into a whole area of possible influences on our health and our bodily systems that I've underestimated in the past, a little bit like perhaps 10 years ago, we underestimated the importance of the microbiome on health, and we're now realizing how important it is. So we must take these areas of innovation very seriously and watch and track this. Thank you very much to her, and I apologize again that we are running a bit tight on time, so I can't invite questions now on this, but would instead like to shift to Tamsin Holland-Brown, who is our next speaker online. And Tamsin, you're at Cambridge University Hospitals, and you're going to be speaking to us about social responsibility in an area that I think I know too little about and would love to learn more from you.
Thank you, Professor
Yours.
Kalra. Are you okay for me to share my screen? Would that be okay?
I think so, but I'm not the decision maker on that.
I'll start unless someone tells me off. I just wanted to say thank you so much for the invitation to speak today, and thank you so much to the other speakers, because it's been a fascinating set of talks, and I feel like I've learned lots. I work as a paediatrician in Cambridge, and I have become involved in the running of the NHS Clinical Entrepreneur Programme, which is a program which looks after, it's a workforce development program. So everybody that works in the National Health Service across England and Scotland and Ireland are able to apply if they've got an idea to come onto the program. It runs every year, and it's a program which, if people have new innovations, where they can apply and they are supported to help develop those innovations. It's exciting because for me, I started off myself joining the program as a paediatrician who had an idea. Most of the ideas at the moment, as you can imagine, are digital health ideas. And in fact, mine was as well. I started several years ago where I joined the program to become one of these entrepreneurs. And the reason that I joined the program was because I'm a paediatrician and I work across general pediatrics, but also I did clinics for children with a hearing loss. And it was difficult because I was able to watch children with the most common type of hearing loss. I don't know if all of you have ever experienced a cough or a cold where you feel really blocked up and you can't hear things properly. As adults, it drains quite quickly. So we tend to be affected for about a week and then we feel better. And even if our hearing's affected when we've got a heavy cold, then we tend to be able to, even if someone says a phrase to us and we don't catch all of it, because we understand, we're not learning new words and we understand phrased speech, we end up being able to make up any gaps that result. But children don't have that. When children have this, their anatomy is small, so when they get blocked up with a cough or cold and it affects their hearing, it goes on for weeks or months. And of course, I don't know if any of you have got children, but children have coughs and colds the whole time. So one of the things that I was worried about was I was seeing children with this particular type of hearing loss that comes and goes. Children that were prone to that, I was starting to see them in my paediatric clinics. And I was worried because there was two things that was on offer for these children. One was a very expensive hearing aid that worked by a type of technology which takes sound and converts it into a vibration and sends it across the bones of the skull to the inner hearing. Or you can have an operation which helps drain that fluid out, called a grommet operation or a T-tube operation. And the problem is the operation was taking, by the time the children have waited to see if this self-resolves, it takes about 12 months. And actually since COVID, the waiting lists are much longer now. So much longer than that, so almost double in most areas. So children are spending a year or two with a hearing loss that we're not routinely helping. And those bone conduction hearing aids that you can see that look a bit like an 80s tennis player, they work very well, but they're £3,000 each. And so all I wanted to do initially was run a study looking at that particular hearing aid, about whether we could put those on children even while they're waiting for a grommet operation, or could we help them? And of course my colleagues said, don't do the research. What's the point in doing a piece of research where you're going to decide that 1 in 10 children, who are affected by this type of hearing loss, starting school, and we know that from school screening right across Europe, it's about 1 in 10 children starting school have blocked ears from coughs and colds. And of course, we can't give all of them £3,000 hearing aid devices. And so my own innovation was about finding something very cheap and affordable. A set of headphones that you can see there with a little microphone that the teacher wears costs under £100, and an app which prevents children from falling behind. So mine also was a digital solution where we were looking at, firstly, in a classroom, could a child wear a hearing aid and the teacher speak? And secondly, when the child went home, could they work on speech and language and all of the areas of development that they're affected by? So the app has free audiobooks, speech and language therapy, and even a little way to test your hearing at home. And because of that, I was became very involved in pediatric apps and how we could use them and how we could use digital health solutions. Of course, children love using digital health solutions. They are the best group of patients who really want to help you with this. And actually, we're doing it quite badly at the moment. People are very uncertain about how to use apps. And more importantly, it can be done quite badly in that there are so many apps out there that children are starting to choose, or parents are starting to choose apps, but they're not suitable or they're incorrect for the child. And so I was asked to join the clinical entrepreneur program, and one of the things that the actual team who deliver it, and one of the things that they wanted to think about was what happens, what's the social value, and what can we do to help innovations from a very basic point. And it's so helpful to have had the previous talks about what we can do about health inequalities and biases, because of course that becomes part of that. So there have been some very difficult things within the NHS unraveled. So as I was doing my innovation, there was a professor who went back to Pakistan and realized that he watched children making surgical equipment that was destined for the NHS, which of course people didn't know because they weren't looking at it. They weren't looking at where the supply chain was, and they didn't know what was happening. And there's been some bad press for the NHS because of that. And people don't like the term social responsibility. It's a called sort of corporate social responsibility or give back. So anyone who's developing digital health solutions to think about social responsibility. And the reason people don't like that terminology is that the word responsibility just means, well, you're responsible for it, not accountable for it. And that kind of give back meaning that you kind of see yourself in sort of a different position, and that we should actually be, it should be a much more equal footing. And so we wanted to create something which spoke in a better way to all of that. And we felt like we used the word based because we wanted people's digital innovations to have a social value, a social purpose base to their innovation, and we wanted them to build on that. But just thinking about the benefit, additional benefit that your innovation can bring. So what's the benefit beyond the innovation? Are you able to skill share or educate others on your journey? Can you think about the ways that you can engage communities well and make sure that the digital solutions or tech solutions are able to speak to them directly or help them directly? And of course, additional well-being, thinking about not just the well-being of your patients, but also the well-being of any staff in that organization, but also about quality of life focused innovation. And sustainability, thinking about, for example, UN sustainability goals and environmental sustainable activities, and diversity support. And then of course, E standing for ethical leadership. So anyone within innovation to think about how they are empowering and enabling others, encouraging teaching and knowledge transfer to enable things such as health inequalities, which was so clearly demonstrated in the last talks about how that can impact on absolutely everything that we're doing. So if you've got that social purpose right at the beginning of your innovation, and as was said so rightly by the other speakers, that actually there is not a lot of regulation around things as they're coming out. So regulation is way behind innovation often. And so at some point you have to have the social purpose and the social value baked in very early on. And actually it makes sense for many reasons, not just that, of course, it's a better way to have the world, but that also the research is very clear that innovations with social sustainability at their core end up with a much more positive business reputation, that people are much more loyal, customers are much more loyal, but also people who come and work for you are much more loyal, that you can then save costs because you're thinking about the environment and social impact of that, and the growth of the business. And of course, in the UK, social value now has to be part of government contracts. So it's important people understand this in order to be able to apply for the contracts and then get them and be able to demonstrate what they're doing in that space. And so the Clinical Entrepreneur Programme wanted to do something very themselves. So they have to demonstrate and model social purpose within their program themselves. And one of the things that they did, there were many initiatives, but one of the things that started this year was there's a homeless charity called Crisis that supports people who are living on the streets. If they have a little, if you then have been through their charity and have been supported, and you've got a good idea and you've met a few criteria and you're setting up your own business, they have access to a little bit of a funding stream. And the small cohort that have been through this charity and managed to apply for that crisis funding stream now actually join the Clinical Entrepreneur Programme and are supported to attend events and network with everybody. And in fact, it's been an enriching process for all of us, because the whole cohort that are on the Clinical Entrepreneur Programme have understood and had better conversations, partnered with charities, and understood the importance of speaking directly to people who are starting with these difficulties. Sorry that that's blurred, but it's just that there have been some companies who have led well in this space. So there, for example, Lego has mandatory training about operating ethically. And the way that we do it in the program is through website content. We have educational events every month, and we do short, sharp information bursts about how important that the base of a social purpose, how important that is, but also, and we have a team lead to ask questions to. And also on the website, we have questions that they can ask themselves, and then we highlight good examples, and we ask them to submit their innovation in order to be able to find the good examples. And of course, that creates data for us, which means that we're able to keep an eye on the accountability of it, and then go back to innovations that just need to think that through a little bit more carefully. And we've done we've been doing some throughout the year. We've been checking with people about how much knowledge they had about creating a socially sustainable innovation, what their next steps could be within social sustainability, and could they give concrete examples. And the blue is at the beginning of the year when they first started with us, and the green is midway through the year. And I'd love to tell you at some point what it's like at the end of year. And the very last thing we did in this program is something called Learning from Excellence. I don't know if you've come across this, and it's an initiative actually that came up by another paediatrician, but is a lovely, again, it was referred to from Professor Mintzer, which was about the importance of error. And the reason is that how we learn in healthcare from problems, or what we should do, is that that if there's error, we come down hard on it and we think about it. But of course, it's a normative graph, isn't it? So if you've got a normal working graph, everybody's in the middle, which is where your healthcare is supposed to be, and then things go wrong at one end, and we capture that, and then they're called near misses, and people report them, and people get told off, and then on the other side of that graph is excellence. There's great care going on, and we're not learning from that. We're not capturing that in the same way. And so what we ask within the Clinical Entrepreneur Programme is that if you wanted to say thank you to somebody within the programme, they thank them on a form that we have visibility of. And we are then able to look at what people are thanking other people for, and what it is within that is helpful. And then we take themes out of that, and we're able to see, as well as things that go wrong, as well as where people need more support, but also where excellence is and what we can do more of within the programme. And just to say that the NHS Clinical Entrepreneur Programme is really wanting to partner with other countries and other organisations, and we would very much welcome emails or contacts. And thank you for letting me speak today.
Tamsin, thank you very much. That was a very nice presentation, which started by highlighting some of the issues and challenges, but then you shifted very nicely into how what good could look like, and how things might actually be done in a positive way. So thanks very much for that. Now, I'm not terribly sure about timing because I think we still have to squeeze in one more presentation. I would have liked to have a bit of time for discussion, and I'm a little bit nervous that we're probably not going to get that. So what I would like to do is to encourage that people use the chat to send Tamsin any comments or questions, and that you can watch those. But I am sorry that we're still going to run just a few minutes past the hour, but we have one final talk, which I believe is a recording again. Is that right? Is that from Emmanuel Ibarra from Canada?
Well, thank you, everybody.
Very good. I'm glad you're here in person. Virtually. I thought it was only a recording, but that's great.
Well, whichever way it works well. I'm glad I'm up early, and good afternoon, Danke, and good morning for anyone from Canada. Do you want me to go ahead and speak?
Yes, please. I think a real person is better than a recorded person. So please go
Let me
ahead.
see if I can share my slides.
Please start. We're ready for you. Your title slide is on screen.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, and good morning if you're here, and good evening if you're in Southeast Asia. Thank you very much for allowing me to share some idea on tele-sonography, a potential digital health strategy for rural and remote communities. I acknowledge my colleagues, Dr. Sebastian Debel and Dr. Ndidi Abara. One is in Sudbury, the other one is in Arizona, United States. We have no conflict of interest to declare. Monitoring of uroflow patterns of our patients are important function of the urologist. By the way, I'm a urologist. Many devices and several techniques are in use in hospitals and institutions and office practice. Interest in audio-based uroflowmetry make telemedicine and smartphones technologies potential drivers for self-empowerment, improvement of access, home-based care, and digital health. We evaluated the use of a publicly available eUroflow app in a smartphone in rural Northern Ontario to determine whether participants are able to download the app, generate data, and send to the urologist for review and treatment decisions. This study was carried out between June 15, 2021 and February 18, 2022, with approval from the Laurentian University Ethics Review Board. This is a standard treatment where a participant or patient is referred to the urologist with a urinary symptom, and the urologist may perform uroflowmeter in a standard library or other methods in the office or in the hospital. For this study, the inclusion criteria were adult men and women above the age of 18 who owned a smartphone, had internet access, and had a standard toilet at home referred with a urological condition. Those excluded had no cell phones, either were in urinary retention or non-consenting. The design of the were mainly that of prospective, qualitative, quantitative, and descriptive. So we had a referral from the primary care or new existing. They were trials scheduled for encounter, virtual or face-to-face with the urologist who did an assessment and discussed the use of the eUroflow app. And then based on consent, a unique ID is generated to allow the patient to download the app, use the app on 4 consecutive days for all urination activities. And then there's a follow-up e-visit through the Ontario Telemedicine Network. This is a provincial network that is provided by the province free of charge to all residents in the province of Ontario. And then this is followed up with a telephone or e-visit where the doctor meets with a participant to discuss the results of the data sent by the participant. And then this was followed by a FitLine, an online survey, giving us information about the perception of the participant in terms of the digital eEuroflow app and the telemedicine encounter. Again, the participant may withdraw consent at any time during the study. These are the results. Out of 40 participants, 36, 90% completed the trial, and they were aged between the age of 22 to 75 years, with average age of 64. These are some of the diagnoses which were varied, and we got good results from all the participants. I'd like to share with you one particular case. This was a 55-year-old lady who had had urgency frequency nocturia off and on for 6 months. There was difficulty getting a urologic consultation, and for some reason they found my address on the website. And I saw initially by telemedicine. She gave no history of no fever, no dysuria. Urinalysis, urine culture was sterile and normal. There was no history of diabetes, no hypertension, no previous pelvic, no abdominal surgery. The ultrasound of the abdomen and pelvis were normal. Telemedicine consultation through the OTN, that's Ontario Telemedicine Network, showed on video examination she appeared healthy, well hydrated, no discomfort. She was counseled regarding future diagnostic possibilities. I had cystoscopy in the hospital, uroflowmetry in my office, or eEuroflow at home by herself using the TeleSono-Euroflow app. She opted and consented to the use of the eEuroflow app at home and sent her data on the 29th. Actually, this is a recent one, on the 29th of September this year. So we had a follow-up e-visit and the OTN with the urologist. Symptoms and data were reviewed. She actually reported that her symptoms had improved. And therefore the plan was continue what through waiting, lifestyle adjustment, and follow up in 3 months. And of course, she chose to follow up in 3 months. This example showed the value of this Euroflow app at home at nature's call and helping the patient take ownership of her own symptoms and provide some solutions that was acceptable. This case too is an anonymous gentleman who downloaded the app on the web, recorded his voiding pattern, fluid intake, and his meals and bowel movement. So this app may serve other purposes which we have not looked at. It could be a voiding diary, it could be a nutrition record, it could be an exercise program record with medication record. We do not know and have not done that evaluation. So the usage of eEuroflow app, 90% use the app, send the data, mailed out their information to the urologist for an encounter. Some have continued to use the app for several months. The highest user sent over 60 data sets, average of 12.9. All 36 found the app easy to download into their smartphones, found it easy to use and generate data. It was easy, provided convenience at nature's call. Multiple self-directed urination data in the home was possible. And this was most appropriate for physical distancing, particularly during the pandemic. Management in selected cases was possible during the pandemic. We found this potential for improved access, cost saving, and the participants' empowerment in self-care. It reduced anxiety associated with hospitalization for facilities Euroflowmetry. However, the data are individualized, generated for specific individual, not generalization. At the present test, there are limitations. The data is individualized, conclusions cannot be generalized. Surrounding noise, type of toilet bowl may have influence on the output. Distance of the smartphone microphone from the bowl or container may also affect results. Presently, the software is not able to generate voided volume maximum and average flow like the conventional machines, but in fact, if people take a plastic container with a measuring device, they can actually generate this data through the software. Like I said, this is changing as we are working and gaining experience on this software. Presently, there are no comparative study in our center with the conventional methods, but this is something we can look into in the future. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, sound waves through the smartphone app is useful for individuals, appear to be simple and convenient. It can generate large amount of e-urination data, potential for monitoring, therapeutic, and surveillance purposes. This provides a possible digital health strategy and calls for multi-center trials and comparative studies. These are my references, and thank you very much. Donkey, thank you, merci, ndewo, miigwech. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and it's a delight to see. Some of our presentations are, of course, abstract. They're about data, and it's nice to have some clinically centered, patient-centered talks. We've had one at the very beginning of this session, and now you've closed us again by reconnecting us with the real patient and the real health issues that they have. So thank you very much for that. I know that we are now 5 minutes over the time, and I suspect people in the physical audience are, maybe you can smell lunch and it's you're wanting to run, but can I just check, Farah, if you don't mind, can we allow just 1 minute in case there's a question?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a long line to get lunch anyway. What's the rush to be at the back of the line? You might as well relax in the room. Use your brain for another minute.
Yes, we can have a question. Are there any questions? Do we have any in the chat?
No, the chat's actually been very quiet, to be honest.
Okay. Well, I guess we don't have any questions here on site. Yeah.
Well, perhaps I could just maybe ask you one question, because I mean, to me, it's really important that we have this combination of the use of technologies that give patients a different way of capturing how they are and enabling a very rich and more evidence-based, if you like, communication with their clinicians. And that's what you're doing. You're shifting from a history into measurable data that the clinician can use, but also you're enabling people who are not finding it easy to get to a clinic for physical reasons to do so, to have a remote method of communicating and keeping in touch with their clinicians. Do you have an ambition for where you would go next? Is there another clinical scenario in which you're saying, well, now this works well and we've proven it in a study? The next thing I'd like to do is this or that. Do you have any ambitions?
Yes, thank you very much, sir, for that comment and question. What we would love to do, I believe in collaborative work. What we would like to do is, one, if there are partners we can develop within Canada, around the globe, particularly in the areas of the world we tend to call LMICs, particularly where the needs may be in this era where the smartphone is more or less ubiquitous, particularly for everyone to be having access to good care. So if we can have multi-center trials to look at this app and see what it can do, then the next step is to compare the function in terms of uroflowmetry with the conventional methods to see if they're comparable. And then the next step is, if we think we have enough information based on what I heard from my colleague from National Health on BASE, then we'll be ready to launch. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Yeah, I know. I think that's extremely helpful. And I'm very pleased anyway. I mean, the last thing I wanted is that you felt great, I can relax now and let it just float. So I'm really pleased to hear your very proactive ideas. That's great. Farah, do we have time? I understand that there is somebody in the audience who'd like to ask a question.
Yes.
Can we squeeze another 1 minute before we let your colleagues have lunch?
Definitely.
Maybe just,
Okay.
just one question. Hello, Deepak, this is Martina Rimmele. We will meet in 2 weeks.
And here.
Oh, yes.
I have actually, if you allow, a question to the first speaker of this afternoon session on the algorithm for the Wilson's disease, but I'm not sure if he's still here.
Well, I'm looking at the list of participants.
So I'm happy to answer your question.
Great.
Oh, great.
I think
Great.
it's off.
You're
The
faster
mic
than
is
me.
Really? I think you heard me.
Yeah, that's
Yes,
fine.
yes.
Yeah.
Keep going.
So your algorithm is very fascinating. And while you were talking, I was thinking maybe you could teach your algorithm with new inputs of physicians in the electronic health record. But then you answered this idea already that you are not really allowed to get back to that due to some data privacy issues. But maybe that would be one thing to use your algorithm really to even augment the possibilities for diagnosis of Wilson's disease, to have some more symptoms maybe added. Have you thought along those lines maybe?
So we evaluated several options. So we thought, of course, about kind of, let's say, data-based feedback from our physicians, maybe in an anonymized and aggregated way. And indeed, we're exploring this possibility also from a technical perspective. So this is one thing. And you're right, we could then train maybe even a more advanced algorithm and decision support system. And on the other hand, we are also exploring the possibility to feed our system with data-based knowledge. I mean, this is difficult to train. So if we talk about machine learning, for example, the critical that the training data sets never are big enough because of the nature of rare diseases. But of course, we're exploring also this.
Great, thank you.
Very good, thank you. Well, I think that I would like to close this session by thanking all of the speakers. We've heard a really rich and diverse set of inputs, but I do believe now we have exceeded our official time by several minutes. And so I'd like to thank everyone who's remote, and just to remind all of you remote speakers that remote participants rather, that the special Zoom you've used for this session is closing, and you go back to the main link for the after lunch resuming of the plenary-based sessions. And those of you that are in the room, thank you for surviving a few extra minutes without food, but we now wish you all a lovely lunch.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.